The corridors of the Imperial Palace stretch for miles in every direction. A labyrinth of marble, bone, and gold, older than memory itself. The air hums with incense and ozone, the tang of sanctified machinery fusing with the scent of burning oils. Pilgrims kneel in silent awe, their faces pressed against the stone floors that have been polished smooth by centuries of tears. They come from every corner of the Imperium, drawn by the same myth, that here, within the heart of Terra, rests the god who saved mankind. But few truly understand what lies beyond the last gate. The Golden Throne is not a seat of glory. It is a tomb, a machine built to hold death in place and call it divinity. The legends call it radiant. The truth is that it bleeds. At its core lies the Emperor, or what remains of him. His body, long ago burned to ash and sanctified metal, is bound within a shell of psychic energy. Tubes thicker than a man's torso burrow into withered flesh, feeding fluids that have not been natural for 10 millennia. The machine breathes for him. The machine dreams for him. When the Mechanicus speak of it, their voices tremble not with faith, but with calculation. The throne consumes the psychic essence of 10,000 souls each day. An unbroken ritual. Every death converted into a whisper of light that flickers across the warp as the Astronomican. To the priests, it is worship. To the custodians, it is duty. To those who have seen it, it is horror beyond comprehension. The throne room itself is vast enough to swallow mountains. Great pillars of adamantium rise like the ribs of a god, supporting vaults inscribed with the names of the countless dead who have sustained this place. The light is perpetual. Not sunlight, but the eerie radiance of the Emperor's own decaying aura. A psychic glow that never fades, never dims, only corrodes. Every few moments, a tremor runs through the floor. A pulse, like a heartbeat. Some say it is the Emperor's own. Others say it is the machine struggling to keep him alive. Whatever it is, the sound never stops. It is the rhythm of humanity's survival, and its damnation. The custodes guard the chamber, their armor glinting like molten gold beneath the sacred lights. They do not speak. They do not move. Some of them have stood there for centuries, watching over the throne without rest or reprieve. To gaze upon the Emperor directly is forbidden, even to them. They see only flashes of motion through psychic haze, the blur of a once human form flickering like a dying flame behind layers of refractive wards. When the sacrifices begin, the silence deepens. Below the throne, deep within the cathedrams, the chosen are brought in, a procession of psykers gathered from across the galaxy. They have been told they are to serve the Emperor in the highest way imaginable. Most are too far gone to question what that means. Their minds have been broken by the journey, their powers chained by runes etched into their flesh. They are led in lines, blindfolded and trembling, each step echoing off the cold stone. Chanting fills the air, low, rhythmic, mechanical. It is the sound of thousands of priests reciting binary litanies, each word a code that unlocks another layer of ritual machinery. The voices blend into a single, thunderous harmony as the gates to the throne's lower sanctum open. There is no sound of screaming. Not yet. The psykers are connected one by one to the neural pylons that feed into the throne's main conduits. Their life essence is measured, quantified, assigned value by tech priests, whose hands shake with both reverence and fear. They do not see the faces of those they condemn. To them, this is sacred science, the highest act of devotion the flesh can perform. When the first switch is thrown, the air shivers. A beam of golden light erupts from the apex of the throne, shooting skyward through the dome, piercing the heavens. For a moment, every astropath in the galaxy feels it. A surge of warmth, of connection, of unbearable clarity. It is the Emperor's breath, exhaled across the void. But for those in the chamber, it is agony made visible. The psykers convulse, their eyes blazing with light as their souls are drawn from their bodies. They burn like candles one after another, their screams lost beneath the roar of the machine. The energy flows upward, into the throne, into the Emperor, and out into the warp. A beacon that guides every ship through the tempest, that keeps humanity from being devoured by the void. When the light fades, all that remains of them are husks, blackened, hollow, and still. Their names are erased from all records. They have served. They are no longer needed. The custodians remain unmoved. The priests continue their chanting. The Mechanicus record the readings. Life continues. Death continues. And above it all, the Emperor remains, motionless, eternal, sustained by the endless sacrifice. There are moments, rare and fleeting, when the priests claim they hear him speak, not with words, but through pulses of energy, psychic impressions that ripple through the chamber like the memory of thunder. Some say he thanks them, others say he weeps. None dare to know for sure, because to truly understand what sits upon that throne is to risk madness, to see not a god, but a corpse that refuses to die, to realize that humanity's greatest hope is a being trapped between existence and oblivion, fed by the endless death of its own children. And yet, none question it. None can. The Imperium does not survive on truth. It survives on faith, enforced at the edge of a blade. Every day, more ships arrive at Terra, bearing the next wave of psykers. The cycle continues. The machine drinks. The light burns on. For in the grim darkness of the far future, humanity cannot live without its god, and its god cannot live without its victims. Far beneath the surface of Terra, deeper than any human eye can bear to see, lies the engine that devours the galaxy's brightest minds and turns them into fuel for faith. The Adeptus Astronomica call it the soul furnace, though never allowed. To name it is to admit its horror. It is a cathedral of ash, its walls lined with the remains of psykers who once screamed prayers that no god answered. Every inch of it hums with the vibration of psychic agony. There is no silence here. Only the unending pulse of millions of souls crying out as they are consumed. Their fear does not fade when their bodies die. In the warp, the echo of their terror burns forever, feeding the golden light of the Astronomican that guides mankind's fleets. To the common imperial citizen, the Astronomican is a miracle, the light that pierces the warp, the Emperor's everlasting beacon. But within the catacombs, where the rituals occur, the miracle reveals its cost. The furnace is vast, built into the ancient bedrock of Terra itself. Its core is a labyrinth of psychic amplifiers, pylons carved with sigils older than the Imperium, each one tuned to transmit the will of the Emperor through the Empyrean. There are hundreds of them, each shaped like the skeletal hand of a titan reaching upward. At the center, suspended above the pit, hangs the crucible, a floating cage of gold and glass. Inside it, 10,000 psykers writhe, their minds bound by silver cords, their flesh already burning from the inside out. They are still alive when it begins. Acolytes move among them, their faces hidden behind bronze masks, whispering binary prayers that sound like sobs. The rituals are precise. Each word, each motion, a line in a grand equation of faith and despair. The energy released by their deaths must be measured exactly. If even one fragment of a soul escapes the circuit, it risks drawing predators from the warp, and so the priests kill them slowly. Their deaths must be controlled, their psychic resonance harmonized, their terror guided into the right frequency. The process is as old as the throne itself. It was never perfected, only ritualized. Each moment, 1,000 souls collapse into light, their final thoughts drawn through the circuits of the Astronomican and focused into the void. Their essence becomes the Emperor's voice. Every warp-capable vessel feels it. A burning line across the darkness, the whisper that says, "Follow me home." It is a beautiful thing, if one does not see the cost. The furnace feeds directly into the throne through conduits that run for miles, arteries of gold and steel pulsing with energy. The Astronomican burns with such intensity that the air itself vibrates. The walls melt and reform, metal flowing like candle wax under psychic heat. Only the most experienced tech priests can survive within its radius for more than a few minutes before their nervous systems begin to unravel. Those who work here for years cease to be entirely human. They speak in equations, their thoughts half in binary, half in prayer. The Mechanicus calls them the soul rights. They are the keepers of the Emperor's light, the ones who regulate the flow of death. The soul rights rarely speak to outsiders, but the stories that leak from their ranks are enough to haunt an entire generation of adepts. Some claim that they can hear the voices of the psykers long after their bodies have burned. Whispers trapped in the circuits, crying through the conduits, begging to be released. Others swear that the Emperor himself speaks through them, not in words, but in visions. One soulwright, before he was executed for heresy, described what he saw. "He is not dead," the man said, trembling. "He is dreaming, and in his dreams he is drowning. The souls we feed him keep his head above the surface. For everyone that dies, he breathes once more. For everyone we fail to send, he sinks deeper. And one day, the ocean will win." The Inquisition purged the record. But in the lower archives, fragments of that testimony remain, encoded into machine script, too dangerous to destroy, too holy to forget. Every day, the furnace burns hotter. The number of psykers required has risen steadily for centuries. The administratum hides the figures, but those who serve the Golden Throne know the truth. The Emperor's hunger is growing. Where once 10,000 souls were enough to sustain the Astronomican, now 20,000 vanish daily. The Mechanicus insists this is due to inefficiencies in the warp. The Ecclesiarchy calls it divine expansion. The Emperor's light spreading further into the void. Neither explanation satisfies the adepts, who have to keep the furnace burning. They see the numbers. They hear the screams. And some of them whisper that the Astronomican no longer shines from the Emperor at all, that something else has taken hold of it. Perhaps it is the machine spirit of the throne feeding itself. Perhaps it is the collective psychic residue of trillions of human deaths, forming something vast and hungry. Perhaps it is the Emperor's shadow, not his will but his ghost. No one knows, and no one dares to find out. To question is to die. And yet, there are moments when even the most loyal servants pause. When the lights flicker across the furnace chamber, when the golden flames waver, when the chanting falters for a heartbeat, and they feel something looking back. A presence. Vast. Indifferent. Watching them die and wondering what they are. They do not speak of it afterward. They redouble their prayers, increase the sacrifices, and remind themselves that doubt is heresy. But late at night, when the machinery grows quiet and only the hum of the Astronomican remains, they hear the faintest of sounds echoing from the conduits, a voice, low and human, whispering a single question through the static. How many more? No one answers, because in the Imperium of man, there is no number large enough to satisfy the light that guides it. The Astronomican burns eternally, not as a symbol of hope, but as a warning. Humanity is not led by faith but by fire, and every time a starship finds its way home, it does so by following the trail of ashes left by those who were fed to the soul furnace of mankind. They call it the Black Pilgrimage, though officially it does not exist. There are no records, no songs, no commendations for those who take part in it. Yet every day, across the infinite breadth of the Imperium, thousands begin this silent march. They are the psykers, the cursed and the gifted, the mutants of the mind whose very existence threatens the worlds they were born on. And their final destination is always the same, the golden throne of Terra. It begins with the ships, the black ships, massive obsidian leviathans that glide through the void like silent predators. They arrive without warning, their presence alone enough to chill the blood of entire worlds. For most Imperial citizens, they are only myth, whispered about in terrified tones, the way children might speak of ghosts. But when the black ships appear in orbit, myth becomes reality, and fear becomes law. The arrival is always the same. The Ecclesiarchy declares a planetary fast. The Administratum suspends all work. The skies darken with thunderous storm fronts, as if the warp itself recoils from the ship's gravity. And then, the harvest begins. The psykers are rounded up by the Adeptus Arbites and local enforcers, herded from hives, settlements, and wastelands. Some come willingly, believing they have been chosen by the Emperor. Others must be dragged screaming from hiding places, their eyes wild with visions, their minds already unraveling from contact with the warp. Families watch as their sons and daughters are taken away, their screams echoing through the streets until the sound is swallowed by the ship's sealed hatches. To those left behind, it is salvation. To those taken, it is a death sentence delayed. Inside, the black ships are cathedrals of shadow and silence. The walls are lined with null wards and psi dampeners, ancient technology so powerful that even the most gifted psyker can barely form a coherent thought. Every corridor smells of oil, iron, and fear. The lights are dim, flickering with the pulse of the Geller field that shields the ship from the warp's hunger. The psykers are confined in cells stacked like tombs, their bodies restrained by barbed cables and binding seals carved directly into their skin. Every few hours, tech priests walk the rows, chanting static prayers while adjusting their restraints. Those who resist are silenced. Those who weep are ignored. There is no individuality here, no names, no histories. The psykers are referred to only by number, branded with serial runes on their skulls. Some still try to speak, whispering to each other through the walls, but the silence swallows them. Within days, most forget their own voices. Above them, in the command sanctum, the navigator charts the warp route to Terra. His third eye glows faintly beneath a shroud of gold cloth, his face stretched thin by decades of service. To guide a black ship through the Imperium is to sail upon a river of screams. The psychic energy that fills the holds below bleeds through the ship's hull, forming ghostly shapes in the void outside. Shadows twist and press against the Geller field, whispering promises of freedom in voices that no human should hear. Sometimes, the weaker psykers vanish in the night, their cells found empty, their restraints melted from the inside out. The crew never speaks of it. The mechanicus simply increases the voltage in the walls, and the voyage continues. The journey to Terra can take months, sometimes years. For the psykers, time becomes meaningless. They dream endlessly, haunted by visions of light and pain, their thoughts not their own. Some see the Emperor calling to them in gold and fire. Others see a great shadow watching from behind his throne. By the time they reach the Sol system, most no longer remember where they came from. When the ship finally descends into Terra's polluted skies, the psykers are brought from their cells. They stumble into the light, blinking at the sight of the world they will never truly see again. The surface of Terra is a world of contrasts. Blinding towers of gold piercing clouds of industrial smog, seas of pilgrims moving like rivers of flesh through streets lit by holy fire. Every breath tastes of ash and devotion. The psykers are marched through these streets in silence, escorted by the Sisters of Silence, the null maidens whose very presence extinguishes psychic thought. To stand near one is to feel your mind collapse inward, as if smothered by an invisible hand. To the psykers, it feels like drowning. The citizens fall to their knees as the procession passes. Some weep. Some reach out, desperate to touch the robes of the condemned, believing that contact with the chosen will bring them divine favor. None of them realize that these souls are already dead. The march continues for hours, down through gates of adamantium, through corridors lined with imperial saints carved from human bone, into the catacombs of the palace where the air hums with static energy. Here, beneath the surface, the true face of the Imperium reveals itself. The path to the Astronomican is lit by pyres of burning incense and guarded by custodians who stand motionless as statues. They do not look upon the psykers. To them, this is routine. A necessary sacrifice, repeated endlessly since the days of the heresy. Each new procession is identical to the last. And yet, there are whispers among the priests. Stories that not all who are taken to the throne die. Some are twisted, reshaped by the Emperor's psychic will, their minds hollowed out and remade into conduits for his power. These beings, it is said, become the living machinery of the Astronomican, neither alive nor dead, bound forever to serve as the Emperor's voice. But those are only rumors. The priests would never admit that the Emperor's mercy has limits, or that his hunger might not be entirely holy. Still, some of the older acolytes who have served in the lower sanctums speak of strange figures glimpsed in the shadows, shrouded silhouettes moving among the conduits, their eyes glowing faintly with the same golden light as the Astronomican itself. They are said to be the unconsumed, souls too strong to be burned, too valuable to waste. They whisper to the newly arrived psykers in their dreams, comforting them before the offering. Do not fear, they say. Your pain will light the stars. The psykers believe them. They always do. When the time comes, the procession ends at the Gate of Souls, a vast, circular portal that hums with psychic resonance. Beyond it lies the inner sanctum of the Astronomican, where the sacrifices take place. The air here is alive, vibrating with unseen energy. The psykers collapse to their knees, overwhelmed by the weight of it. And then the Sisters of Silence begin their chant. Their voices are not sound, but absence, a silence so complete that it drowns the mind. The psykers scream, though no noise escapes their lips. The light fades from their eyes, and one by one they are led into the darkness beyond the gate. None return. Above, the pilgrims of Terra rejoice. They see the faint flicker of the Astronomican blaze brighter in the sky and fall to their knees in prayer. They believe they have witnessed a miracle. They are not wrong. But miracles in the Imperium are paid for in blood, and every shining beacon begins with a procession of the damned. They are called the Adeptus Astronomica, keepers of the Emperor's flame, wardens of the soul furnace, interpreters of the light that burns across the warp. To most of the Imperium, they are invisible. Their faces are never seen, their names never recorded. Yet without them, every ship, every soldier, every world would drift into darkness. Their temple lies within the shadow of the Golden Throne, a sanctum of gold and stone where the sound of chanting never ceases. The air trembles with the hum of the Astronomican above, a vibration that seeps into the bone and never leaves. Every wall glows faintly with radiant energy, each surface carved with prayers that have long since become equations. The adepts move through the halls in hooded robes, their eyes replaced with mirrored augmetics that reflect nothing but the light of the Emperor's will. To the outsider, they are priests. To themselves, they are conductors of divinity, engineers of the divine machine. Each one has been trained from birth in the dual disciplines of faith and science. They study the mathematics of worship, the geometry of sacrifice. They speak of psychic harmonics as though reciting scripture, describing the Emperor's will as a frequency that must be maintained through careful calibration of death. Every morning, they gather in the Chamber of Alignment, a vast amphitheater carved into the bedrock of the palace. There, surrounded by statues of saints and data shrines, they review the pulse of the Astronomican. Holographic displays shimmer in the air like ghosts, maps of the warp, star charts drawn from psychic energy, sigils marking the edges of the Emperor's light. Each fluctuation, each tremor in the beacon's strength, is treated as an omen. When the light falters, the adepts chant louder. When it grows brighter, they fall to their knees in gratitude. But beneath the ritual lies calculation. Every fluctuation corresponds to a pattern. A death, a surge, a deviation in the number of souls fed to the throne. The priests record these patterns obsessively, believing them to be messages. Some claim to interpret them as words, fragments of divine communication transmitted through the burning of psykers. When the light stutters, one archmagos wrote, the Emperor speaks in the language of pain. We must listen, for his silence is the sound of dying stars. Their devotion is absolute, their madness inevitable. Most adepts do not live long. The psychic radiation of the Astronomican corrodes the mind as surely as acid dissolves flesh. Many lose the ability to sleep, their dreams consumed by visions of golden fire. Others begin to speak in tongues, muttering binary hymns in their sleep. A few simply vanish, their bodies found days later with expressions of ecstasy frozen on their faces, their eyes burned to ash. Yet for each one who falls, 100 more arrive, chosen from across the Imperium, tested for devotion and resilience. They come willingly, believing that to serve here is the highest calling a human can achieve. They are not entirely wrong. Without them, the Emperor's machine would fail. Without them, the Astronomican would die. But to maintain it, they must become part of it. The rituals of calibration are brutal. Once every solar cycle, the adepts gather at the base of the throne to conduct the rite of reconnection. The process involves direct communion with the Emperor's psychic field, a contact that no human mind can endure unaided. The adepts don neural crowns laced with silver threads, connecting their consciousness to the throne's machine spirit. The instant the link is established, they scream. What they see in that moment is never spoken of, but their records suggest flashes of impossible visions. The galaxy burning, gods devouring each other, the Emperor's own voice echoing through the void in tones of despair. Some die instantly, their brains liquefied. Others live, but emerge changed, their eyes glowing faintly with golden light, their voices hollow, their faith unshakable. These survivors become the vocali, the living conduits of the Emperor's will. They walk among the adepts, their words treated as holy decree. When they speak, all kneel. When they fall silent, the priests tremble. But even the vocali are not immune to doubt. In the private chambers beneath the temple, guarded by custodes whose faces remain forever hidden, there are archives older than the Imperium itself. Within them are records written during the first days after the Emperor's entombment, testimonies of the early adepts who built the throne's systems, who saw his body still bleeding as they sealed him within. The texts speak not of a god, but of a dying man. They describe his mind flickering like a storm, his body breaking apart under the weight of the warp. They detail the first sacrifices, tens of thousands of psykers fed into the machine until his pulse stabilized, and they warn that one day that pulse will stop. The adepts who have read these texts never speak of them. The Inquisition ensures that few ever do. But in the long hours of the night, when the Astronomican's hum grows low and the stars flicker outside the palace windows, some priests begin to question. They ask themselves what would happen if they stopped the sacrifices, if they let the Emperor's light fade, if they freed him from his torment. They never voice these thoughts. They simply write them in their private logs, encoded in the language of prayer. And then, within days, they are reassigned to the lower sanctums, where the radiation is strongest, where the screams never stop. None return. In this way, faith is preserved. The priests of the dying god are not deceived. They know the truth, that the Emperor is not alive, not in any human sense. He is a machine of souls, a construct of suffering. But to speak this truth is to destroy the Imperium itself. So they lie to themselves, and to each other, and to every pilgrim who kneels before the golden light. They call it devotion. But devotion, in the Imperium of man, is just another word for surrender. And so the priests continue their endless labor, tending the dying god, feeding his fire, keeping the lie alive for one more day. For if the lie ever dies, so does mankind. Deep within the sanctum of the Astronomican, beneath the shrines, beneath the prayers, And beneath the faith that cloaks the horror above lies the true mechanism of divinity, the machine that turns agony into light. It is here, in this buried heart of gold and black iron, that the sacred ritual of sacrifice becomes a process. To the adepts who serve it, there is no distinction between worship and work. The Emperor's salvation is not achieved through prayer alone, but through precision, through calibrated death, measured suffering, and conversion ratios written in blood and binary. This is the science of sanctity. This is how mankind feeds its God. The chamber that holds the machinery is vast, a cathedral of pistons and rotating pylons that stretch beyond sight. It vibrates with psychic energy, its walls lined with conduit veins that glow in rhythmic pulses, like arteries of molten gold. From each vein flows the residue of human souls, luminous streams of psychic essence siphoned from the dying psykers above. The air crackles with their remnants, thick with the scent of ozone and burned flesh. Every breath is an act of devotion, every exhale a prayer of survival. In the center of this colossal chamber stands the core transmutator, the machine that bridges flesh and flame. Its surface is a mosaic of moving sigils, ancient and alien, inherited from the dark age of technology but rewritten in the Emperor's name. The device hums with constant hunger, its deep metallic voice echoing like a chant. Around it, hundreds of tech priests attend in silence, each motion guided by ritual protocol. They are the calculators of faith, a sect of the Adeptus Mechanicus, who have long abandoned the difference between logic and liturgy. For them, faith is formula. Each morning begins with the rite of synchrony. The priests gather around the transmutator, raising their servo limbs in perfect unison as they recite the numbers that define the Emperor's appetite. These are not random chants, but precise calculations. The quantity of psychic energy required to maintain the Astronomican for a single Terran day. The equation changes constantly, dependent on warp tides, solar alignment, and fluctuations in the Emperor's pulse. When the last line of the equation is spoken, the killing begins. The psykers above are connected to the grid through spire conduits, their life force channeling downward through the veins of the machine. The energy arrives in waves, bursts of raw psychic light that flood the chamber with brilliance so intense it burns the shadows to ash. The priests stand unmoved, their minds shielded by layers of neural code and faith. Each soul burns differently. Some erupt in a single blinding flash, too volatile, consumed instantly. Others dim slowly, lingering in the conduits like dying embers, their psychic residue dripping into the collectors below. The machine accounts for each variance. Servitors record the values, adjusting flow regulators with surgical precision. The process is unending, unrelenting. To the untrained eye, it would look like madness, the chaotic dance of light, machinery, and death. But to the priests, it is beauty. It is order born of horror. And yet, there is something within the system that even the Mechanicus cannot explain. Every so often, when the transmutator reaches full capacity, a surge ripples backward, a pulse of energy that defies containment. It flows up through the conduits, into the Astronomican itself, and for an instant, the light of the Emperor burns brighter than ever before. Every astropath across the Imperium feels it, a warmth, a whisper of the divine. They describe it as the Emperor's blessing, his love reaching out through the void. But in the chamber below, the priests see what truly happens. The surge leaves nothing behind. Every servitor caught in its path disintegrates. Every machine screams in binary agony as systems overload. The psychic field collapses, then reforms stronger than before. The data collected afterward shows no correlation, no cause, no reason. It is as though the machine itself has taken something unseen, unmeasured, and utterly human. Some adepts believe this is the Emperor feeding not on souls, but on emotion, consuming faith, fear, and despair in equal measure. They whisper that he no longer distinguishes between sinner and saint, that he has become the perfect reflection of his Imperium, merciless, mechanical, and hungry. Of course, such thoughts are heresy, and heresy is not permitted to live. Those who voice these doubts vanish quickly. Their neural codes are erased, their bodies recycled into the very machinery they questioned. The Mechanicus calls it reintegration. The priests call it atonement. Still, the rumors persist, carried in the static that hums through the conduits, in the flicker of lights that pulse out of sync, in the soft murmurs that echo through the data shrines when no one speaks. Some claim to hear a voice inside the machine, not the Emperor's, but another. A voice calm and cold, repeating the same phrase over and over again. The balance tilts, the vessel weakens. No one admits to hearing it aloud. But the calculations grow harder every day. The energy output required to sustain the Astronomican has increased by nearly 12% in the last millennium. The priests compensate with more sacrifices, more psykers, more blood. The supply lines of death stretch across the stars, a network of horror hidden beneath the hymns of faith. Every black ship that leaves a world carries not just condemned psykers, but fuel, the raw material of the Emperor's eternity. And as the numbers grow, so too does the silence. The priests begin to lose their individuality. Their flesh becomes pale and translucent, their voices mechanical. The constant exposure to psychic energy alters them at a fundamental level. Some begin to glow faintly, their veins pulsing with golden light. Others lose all physical coherence, dissolving into motes of dust that swirl forever within the chamber. The Mechanicus catalogues these phenomena with clinical detachment. They call it the Ascendant Syndrome, an occupational hazard of serving the throne. The ecclesiarchy, however, calls it a miracle. They preach that those who vanish are taken directly into the Emperor's light, becoming one with his divine machine. Neither explanation comforts those who remain, and so the cycle continues. The psykers die above, the priests die below, and the Emperor burns between them. Each day ends with the litany of continuance, a final prayer whispered by the remaining adepts as the light from the conduits fades. It is not a hymn of hope, but of exhaustion. By flesh we sustain, by death we endure, by his hunger we are made whole. The words echo through the dark until the chamber grows still, and in that silence, beneath the hum of the machine, there is always the faint sound of breathing, slow, ragged, impossibly vast. Whether it is the Emperor's or the machine's, no one knows, and no one dares to find out. There are places within the catacombs of Terra where even the light refuses to linger. Places where the very air tastes of old death, where the walls are slick with condensed sorrow, and where the heat never fades. These are the furnace halls, the final threshold between life and offering, where the Emperor's priests of fire tend to the endless pyres of sanctified flesh. To walk here is to breathe despair. To live here is to forget what life ever meant. The adepts who serve in these depths are called the Incendia Custodi, the wardens of the flame. They are not like the other priests of the Astronomican. Theirs is not the work of precision or sacred mathematics, but of endurance, of keeping the fire burning no matter the cost. Their robes are singed black, their skin coated in soot that never washes away. They sleep on iron, eat the ash of the dead, and speak in whispers because sound itself seems afraid to echo in these halls. The smell is the first thing that seizes the senses, thick and sweet, clinging to the back of the throat like smoke from a pyre. It is the scent of burnt souls. The incendia claim that each soul leaves its own fragrance when it burns. The hopeful smell like incense and honey, the faithless like metal and rot. The scent changes with the strength of belief, with the weight of guilt, with the purity of fear. The priests breathe it in reverently, claiming to read omens in the smoke. But they are not mystics, they are workers. Each day begins with the ignition rite. Massive braziers are lit one by one, using promethium mixed with the remnants of psychic residue gathered from the sacrifice above. The flames burn blue-white, producing neither shadow nor heat that mortals can endure. The priests chant as they move between the furnaces, throwing handfuls of bone dust and powdered gold into the fire to keep it stable. The ashes of the consumed psykers are poured into channels that flow like rivers across the chamber floor, merging into great pits of molten gold. These pits are the soul crucibles, psychic incinerators that refine the last fragments of human essence into usable energy. The Emperor's machine does not waste. Every death is recycled, every molecule of despair converted into the faintest flicker of divine light. The furnaces never go out. Even when maintenance is required, even when the fires rage out of control, they must never be allowed to die. It is said that if even one crucible goes dark, the Emperor will feel it, that his dreams will shudder and the Astronomican will flicker. The last time it happened, entire sectors lost the light. Ships vanished. Worlds burned. The priests remember, even if no one else does. The work is unending. The air shimmers with heat distortion, distorting the faces of the living into something monstrous. The priests carry long rods tipped with adamant hooks to stir the coals, their movements slow and deliberate. Their hands are covered in burns, their eyes long since replaced with optic augments that can see through smoke. Some of them begin to change over time. The psychic radiation that saturates the chamber warps their minds and bodies. Their voices grow deeper, echoing with faint harmonics that do not belong to human throats. Their shadows twist against the walls even when no light strikes them. When they breathe, small sparks drift from their mouths, fragments of soul fire that linger in the air like fireflies. The ecclesiarchy calls them blessed ashen. The Mechanicus calls them anomalies. Whatever they are, they never leave the furnaces. Some claim they no longer can. Among them walks the Prime Incendian, a figure shrouded in blackened gold armor, his face hidden behind a mask of brass shaped like a screaming saint. His voice is carried through a vox grill that hisses like burning parchment. He has tended the fires for longer than any living soul can remember. Some say he no longer sleeps, no longer eats, no longer feels. His flesh has fused with the suit that keeps him alive, and his heartbeat is synchronized with the pulsing rhythm of the furnaces. When new psyker ashes arrive, it is he who performs the blessing of dissolution. He kneels before the flames, drawing sigils of light in the air with a blade of molten gold. As he does, the fires flare higher, their color shifting through the spectrum of the warp. Those watching claim to see faces in the inferno, faces of the sacrificed, their mouths open in silent hymns. For a moment they look peaceful, then the light devours them, and the chamber goes still again. There are whispers among the incendia that the Prime once saw the Emperor, not as the radiant god worshipped above, but as something else entirely. They say he looked into the Astronomican during a ritual surge and saw not light, but hunger. A vast, consuming presence that devoured the souls as fast as they were given. Since that day, he has never spoken of faith again. Only duty, faith burns, he told his acolytes once. Duty endures. The younger priests repeat the phrase like a prayer, though none of them truly understand what it means. When the fires roar too loudly, when the light grows too bright, the priests cover their ears and bow low. The psychic resonance becomes unbearable. Not sound, but thought made solid, pressing against their skulls. Some collapse, blood pouring from their ears and noses. Others begin to laugh uncontrollably, until they are dragged away to the reclamation pits. The survivors rise again and continue working. There is no mercy here, no comfort, no reward. Only the knowledge that if they stop, humanity will burn in the dark. And yet in rare moments of stillness, when the flames settle into a steady rhythm and the smoke forms shapes that almost resemble wings, the priests sometimes hear a voice whisper through the fire. Soft, distant, and inhumanly calm. I remember you. The voice comes only to those near death. They die smiling, their bodies turning to ash before they hit the floor. The others do not speak of it. They simply throw the remains back into the crucibles and continue their work. Outside these chambers, in the marble cathedrals above, the nobles of Terra pray beneath gilded domes, lighting perfumed candles and singing hymns about salvation. They have no idea that their prayers drift downward, swallowed by the smoke that rises from the dungeons, carried to the fires below where souls are burned into eternity. The Emperor's light shines bright across the galaxy, but it smells of smoke. There are few things more terrifying to the Imperium than silence in the warp. When the Astronomican flickers, even for a heartbeat, the galaxy holds its breath. Ships vanish, astropaths scream, planets go dark, and for those who understand what that silence means, those who serve beneath Terra's crust, near the machine that burns souls into light, the flicker is not a mystery. It is a warning. It begins small, almost imperceptible, a tremor in the conduits beneath the throne, a slight drop in resonance across the psychic amplifiers. The priests of the Adeptus Astronomica call it a stutter of the flame. It happens once every few decades, a quirk of the machine that sustains the Emperor's light. But this time, it lasts longer. 3 seconds. 3 seconds of silence. 3 seconds in which 1,000 navigators cry out across the galaxy, clutching their temples as the beacon of the Astronomican vanishes from their sight. For 3 seconds, the Imperium drifts blind through the warp, a leviathan groping through storm and shadow. And in those 3 seconds, something stirs. The first to notice are the soul rights, the Mechanicus adepts who monitor the psychic pulse of the Astronomican from the control sanctum beneath the palace. Their sensors record an anomaly, an inverse resonance pattern, as if something fed back into the throne instead of out. For a brief instant, the machine seemed to devour not just the psykers, but the very light it was meant to emit. Panic spreads quietly among the lower adepts. Orders are sent upward to the custodies and the High Lord's Council. The priests double the sacrifices. 10,000 psykers become 20. The fires of the furnaces roar louder. The corridors fill with smoke, but the light does not stabilize. The Astronomican begins to pulse irregularly, its glow visible from orbit as it flickers between brilliance and shadow. Astropaths on Mars and Luna faint mid-chant. Warp storms bloom like wounds across the void, devouring trade routes and cutting entire sectors from communication. In the Black Library of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the senior magi consult forbidden data scrolls, records from the great heresy that warn of such a pattern. The phrase they find chills even their machine hearts. When the light falters, the Emperor dreams. It is not the first time. The archives describe it. Rare moments when the Emperor's consciousness stirs within the throne, when his mind, trapped between life and death, claws toward awareness. Each time it happens, the Astronomican wavers. Each time more souls are needed to rebind his will. The last such awakening nearly tore Terra apart, and now it is happening again. The priests redouble their chanting, voices cracking from exhaustion. The Mechanicus reroutes energy from every reactor beneath the palace to the throne. The air grows thick with psychic static, the heat unbearable. Some of the acolytes begin to see things in the light. Shapes, faces, eyes watching them from within the glow. "The Emperor stirs," whispers one priest, his voice trembling. "He sees us." His superior silences him with a blade to the throat. Fear spreads like infection. Above ground, the ecclesiarchy orders emergency vigils. Billions of pilgrims flood the streets of Terra, lighting candles that melt together into rivers of wax. They pray for strength, for stability, for the light to return. None of them understand that their God is not dying. He is waking. In the depths of the furnace halls, the incendia custodi work until their hands are black with blood and ash. The prime incendian, his body fused to his armor, kneels before the crucibles and feels the temperature drop. The fires begin to dim, not from lack of fuel, but from something else. As though the flames themselves recoil. He feels it in his bones, a cold pressure, pushing outward from the very core of the throne. He dares to look into the light. For a heartbeat, he sees the Emperor, not as the shining god of humanity, but as a vast silhouette suspended in shadow. A figure of blinding radiance whose face is hidden, whose body burns and reforms endlessly. Around him swirl countless souls, spiraling upward in agony, consumed and reborn in the same breath. And in that instant, the Prime understands the truth. The Emperor is not just fed by their souls, he becomes them. Every life sacrificed adds to his being. Every death reshapes his will. He turns away, screaming. The tremor deepens. Across Terra, the psychic hum becomes a roar. The custodians lock down the throne room. The Adeptus Mechanicus declares a level Primus Sanctum breach. Across the void, astropaths experience seizures so violent their bodies burst into flame. The warp convulses. Tides reversing. Eddies forming where none existed before. And then, the Emperor's voice fills the chamber. Not through sound, but through thought. A presence vast and ancient surges outward, touching every mind connected to the throne. It is not words that they hear, but emotion. Grief, rage, pity, and hunger all at once. It is too much for human minds to bear. Dozens die instantly. Hundreds more collapse, weeping, clawing at their eyes. Those who survive describe visions beyond comprehension. A golden sea boiling with fire. A mountain of corpses stretching to the stars. And above it all, the Emperor's gaze, endless and empty. "I am not awake," the voice whispers, echoing through every skull. "I am remembering." Then the light returns. The Astronomican flares to full strength, its brilliance blinding even through miles of metal and stone. Every warp storm suddenly ceases. Ships find their way again. The priests cry out in joy, declaring it a miracle. "The Emperor has spoken! The faith of mankind is vindicated." But beneath the surface, the survivors of the sanctum know better. They see the instruments, the readings, the data, all unchanged except for one figure. The psychic output of the Astronomican has increased tenfold. The Emperor burns brighter now, yes, but he is burning more. In the following days, the sacrifice quota doubles again. Entire ships filled with psykers are rerouted directly to Terra. The black ships return empty, their crews silent and hollow-eyed. The priests work until they collapse, whispering prayers they no longer believe. At night, some of them claim to hear something new beneath the thrones. Constant hum, a heartbeat that does not match the rhythm of the machine. Slow, human, steady others. Hear weeping. The Mechanicus dismisses it as auditory feedback. The ecclesiarchy calls it divine resonance. But those who have stood closest to the throne, those who have seen the flicker with their own eyes, whisper another possibility, that the Emperor no longer dreams of saving mankind. He dreams of ending it. And when he truly wakes, the light of the Astronomican will not guide ships through the warp. It will burn them, because even gods can grow tired of their worshippers. Faith is the greatest weapon of the Imperium, and its most exquisite poison. It sustains the countless billions who labor, fight, and die beneath the gaze of the Emperor. It fuels armies, holds planets together, and gives meaning to endless suffering. But in the hollow glow of the Astronomican, faith is not belief. It is currency. It is the energy that keeps the corpse of a god alive. The ecclesiarchy calls it purity. The Mechanicus calls it psychic cohesion. The Inquisition calls it control. But those who dwell near the throne know its true name: fuel. When the Emperor's light faltered, the priests of Terra learned a grim truth: that faith itself can be burned. Not as metaphor, not as prayer, but as a tangible psychic resource that feeds the machine. Since that revelation, every cathedral, every shrine, every whispered prayer across the Imperium has become part of the circuitry. The Adeptus Astronomica tracks belief as energy. They measure it through chants, through tears, through the psychic vibrations emitted by the faithful. Billions kneeling in devotion generate currents of thought that ripple across the warp, drawn inexorably toward the golden throne. Each act of worship becomes a spark, a flicker of psychic warmth that joins the great conflagration sustaining him. It is beautiful, and it is monstrous. In the Cathedrum Somnalis, the high sanctuary of the Astronomican's choir, this conversion of faith into flame is orchestrated by the choir masters of resonance. They are not preachers but conductors, directing the mental harmonics of billions of believers as though playing an instrument the size of the galaxy. Their voices, amplified through psychic relays, synchronize the chants of entire worlds. When they raise their hands, planets kneel. When they whisper, millions pray. Every note in their hymn feeds into the great circuit of the Emperor's will. The energy flows upward, invisible rivers of devotion merging with the psychic blood of the sacrificed. The more intense the faith, the hotter the Astronomican burns. But faith is fragile. It can flicker. It can die. And in the endless corners of the Imperium, faith is dying. Worlds once fervent in worship now rot in silence. Soldiers fight in his name but curse his absence in the dark. Planets on the edge of the galaxy whisper heresies too small for the ecclesiarchy to notice, but too large for the machine to ignore. The readings show it clearly. Slight drops in the Astronomican's field strength aligned perfectly with regions where belief has waned. For every world that loses faith, the light dims a little. The priests of the Astronomican call this the bleeding of belief. The ecclesiarchy responds with crusades. Whole sectors are purged to reignite devotion. Cathedrals are built on the bones of the disobedient, stained glass shimmering with the reflection of flames. And always above the din, the choir sings louder, because silence is the enemy of faith. In their zeal, the priests never realize the paradox they serve. The more they demand worship, the more they extinguish it. The more they burn unbelievers, the more unbelief spreads like a contagion. Even on Terra itself, cracks begin to form. In the lower hives of the palace city, the air hums not with hymns but with whispers. Rumors of the Emperor's suffering, of priests disappearing into the furnaces, of custodians who bleed beneath their golden masks. The commoners no longer speak his name in reverence but in fear. They light candles not out of love, but out of superstition, afraid that if they stop, the light in the sky will die. The faith that once united humanity has become an instinct of terror, and yet, the Astronomican feeds on it all: love, hate, hope, despair, devouring every emotion without distinction. The Emperor's machine does not discriminate between saint and sinner. All that matters is the intensity of belief. The choir masters have a saying, one whispered only when the chanting stops. The Emperor does not care why you pray, only that you do. Those who serve closest to the golden throne have begun to suspect that this truth extends beyond metaphor. The light of the Astronomican grows brightest during times of war, of mass suffering, of collective agony. It flares when planets burn, when armies die by the millions, when humanity's cries of desperation echo across the stars. The readings are undeniable. The Emperor grows stronger when his people bleed. The ecclesiarchy, of course, declares this proof of divine justice. The Mechanicus calls it psychic feedback. The Inquisition calls it balance. But the adepts who feed the machine know what it truly means. Humanity has built a god that must consume its own faith to survive. And somewhere, deep beneath the palace, the ancient archives whisper of the end. Buried among forbidden texts and corrupted data slates are fragments of the original throne schematics. Blueprints so old that the ink has fused into the parchment. The last line of the record is written not in binary, but in plain Gothic. When faith runs dry, The light shall burn the world to rekindle itself. It is prophecy and warning both. Perhaps it is already coming to pass. Reports flood in from across the Imperium. Warp storms blooming near holy worlds. Choir ships vanishing mid-psalm, faithful pilgrims turned to ash by invisible flame. Astropaths hear laughter in the Astronomican's light. Some claim the Emperor himself has begun to speak again. Not through words, but through visions that twist the minds of the devout. One such vision spreads like wildfire through the lower shrines of Terra. A single image burned into the minds of hundreds of pilgrims at once. The Emperor's eyes, open for the first time in 10,000 years. Weeping blood that falls as burning stars across the void. The ecclesiarchy calls it a miracle. The Inquisition quarantines the entire district. The priests of the Astronomican triple their sacrifices. And still, the light burns hotter, because faith does not soothe the Emperor. It feeds him. Every hymn, every death, every tear shed in his name strengthens the furnace that holds him captive. Humanity prays to sustain him, but in doing so, they sustain their own bondage. There is no escape from this cycle. To stop believing is to let the light die. To keep believing is to burn forever. In the end, perhaps faith itself was the Emperor's greatest weapon. A design so perfect that even death could not free him from it. The Imperium does not live because of its god. It lives inside him. It is his dream, his nightmare, his cage. And somewhere deep within that endless machinery of worship and suffering, the light flickers, not in weakness but in hunger. Because the faith that feeds the fire has one flaw. Every god, no matter how eternal, eventually wants to be free. At the end of all things, when the stars grow cold and the Emperor's light trembles for the final time, Terra will fall silent, the hymns will cease, the cathedrals will stand empty, the Astronomican will flicker once, a heartbeat, and then gutter out like the last candle in a tomb. No one will know when it happens. No alarms will sound. The light that guided humanity for 10 millennia will simply stop, but the priests will know, they always know. Deep beneath the crust of Terra, the adepts of the Astronomican will feel it first. The sudden void. The absence of psychic pressure that once filled every cell of their bodies. The golden hum that echoed through the palace for 10,000 years will vanish. The silence will be total. And in that silence, something ancient will breathe in. The Prime Incendian will stand before the furnaces. His armor blackened beyond recognition, his hands fused to the haft of his staff. He will watch as the crucibles dim, their molten cores cooling into dull slag. The flames that once devoured the souls of humanity's condemned will die, leaving behind only a faint ember. The echo of a billion screams fading into stillness. The Emperor's hunger has ended, or so it seems. The custodians will march in perfect silence through the throne halls, their golden armor dull beneath the dying light. Some will kneel. Others will simply stand, weapons lowered, as though unsure whether to protect or to mourn. The air will taste of ozone and iron, the scent of endings. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Adeptus Mechanicus will dare to approach the throne. Their servo-skulls will whisper Binharic prayers as they cross the sanctum, instruments trembling in their mechadendrites. They will record what their logic cannot accept. A throne still glowing, but no longer radiant. Its occupant no longer bound by wires, no longer fused to the machine, no longer a corpse. There will be no movement, no gesture, only a presence, vast and weightless, like the memory of fire. The Emperor will not speak, he will remember, and in his remembering, the galaxy will tremble. In the void beyond the palace walls, the Astronomican's absence will tear open the warp like a wound. Without its beacon, ships will drift, lost and blind. Thousands of worlds will vanish into storms. The Tyranids will feast without resistance. The Eye of Terror will widen, its crimson light spilling across the stars like blood. But on Terra, the silence will deepen. The priests will gather in the furnace halls for one final ritual, the consummation of faith. It will be the last offering, the end of their long and terrible labor. The surviving choir masters, their throats raw and bleeding, will kneel before the crucibles. The Prime Incendian will lift his voice for the last time. The fire that began with mankind shall end with mankind. The priests will ignite the ash of 10,000 years, bone dust, incense, and the remnants of psykers long burned to vapor. The fires will rise one final time, white-hot and silent, feeding on the last fragments of the warp's energy. The glow will fill the chamber, erasing shadow and sound alike, and in that light, every priest will see something different. Some will see the Emperor as he was, a man in armor, weary and resolute, eyes filled with impossible sorrow. Others will see a sun devouring itself, collapsing into darkness. A few will see nothing at all. The Prime Incendian will see a single flame, small, trembling, fragile. He will reach for it with a hand that no longer feels pain. The fire will take him. On the surface of Terra, billions will look to the heavens and see the sky open. The golden light of the Astronomican will erupt one last time, brighter than ever before, so bright that even the Voidborn will see it without augury or lens. For a moment, every ship in the Imperium will feel a pull, a direction, a heartbeat that is not their own. And then, the light will fold inward, collapsing into a single point above the palace. The explosion will not be of fire, but of memory. Every soul ever burned in service to the Emperor will be released in an instant. A psychic detonation that sweeps across the galaxy like a wave. The warp itself will recoil. Demons will vanish, screaming, torn apart by the purity of the release. The hive fleets will shatter, their synaptic webs dissolved. Chaos will be silenced. For one glorious moment, the galaxy will be clean, and then, the silence will return. The light will fade, leaving only darkness. The Astronomican will be gone. The throne will stand empty. The golden palace will crumble. And on the ashes of Terra, the wind will whisper the last prayer ever spoken by human lips. He was not our God. He was our reflection. But endings in the Imperium are never final. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, long after the fires of Terra are cold, a faint glow will appear. A single spark adrift in the warp. It will pulse once, then twice, like a heartbeat finding its rhythm again. The spark will drift toward a dead world, its surface scarred by ancient war. When it lands, the dust will stir. A figure will rise from the ash, not golden, not divine, but human. His armor will be burned away, his skin scarred and pale. He will breathe once, feeling the weight of air fill lungs that have not known life for an age. And he will look up at a sky without stars. It is finished, he will whisper. And yet, it begins. The light in his eyes will flicker, not divine, not holy, but real. The last offering has been made, the Emperor has fallen, and from the ashes of his sacrifice, something new begins to stir, something not bound by faith, something not chained by fire, something free.